Today's guest is Peter, a thoughtful and value-driven leader with deep experience in building inclusive cultures and empowering others to thrive. While Peter doesn't have a formal diagnosis himself, he brings a perspective by both lived experience and close relationships with neurodivergent individuals. His openness, curiosity, and commitment to inclusion make him an especially powerful voice in this conversation. I'm so excited for you to listen to today's episode. So, thank you again for joining. Very grateful. Could you tell me a little bit about your journey and why you care so deeply about inclusion?
Well, I think I've always been a bit of a loner or an outsider, the slightly awkward kid for as long as I can remember. And, you learn social graces along the way, but I just hated how I always felt at school and in workplaces, not really part of the crowd. And then you justify to yourself, oh, I didn't really want to be part of the crowd anyway. But everybody wants to be seen and to belong. So as a leader, I've always tried really hard to make my workplaces and my teams places where people of all shapes and sizes and inclinations can really belong. And I work in communications. I've worked in newspapers and as a journalist and as an editor and then in PR. And this is a field that works at the intersection of reputation and storytelling and people. But I've very quickly seen that there's in the workplace and in every setting in life, there's ways that you're expected to behave if you want to fit in. And if you don't or you can't behave in that way, you're sidelined in big ways and in small ways. So for me, this idea of workplaces being safe spaces where people can really be seen and heard and valued for who they are, that's really come to resonate with me. And, a lot of companies talk about bringing your whole self to work, and not many do that. And I've seen how people flourish when they feel seen. And for me, inclusion, it's not this box ticking exercise. It's the foundation for creativity and trust. And, so for me, diversity and in the context of this conversation, neurodiversity, I suppose, is a key part of that conversation because it also challenges this thinking that there's only one way to succeed. Because, we all just want to be seen, don't we?
Wow. Very interesting start, that feeling, because I can definitely relate to that, not fitting in, not feeling understood, different. Do you feel ever you were sidelined when you were in work? Was there any experiences that you would feel comfortable about, or?
I never really played the same game as everybody else. And, not because I wanted to be a rebel or a rebel without a clue. It was just that, there were certain rituals. And I've always pushed back against this idea of, that you have to all follow the same rituals. And I saw it with people around me, people in my early working days in a newspaper in South Africa, in a very difficult time in South Africa's history where there is this transition from an apartheid regime to a democratic regime at a time where there was a change from how newspapers were moving from old-fashioned printing presses to an electronic industry. So it was a time of huge change, but there was this obliviousness, and for me, it was in an industry where I expected the weirdos, the unusual ones, the misfits to be embraced, and they weren't.
Wow. A hard experience.
I think I think many people feel that way, and I think many people you will find wear a mask to work. And I think, well, look, everybody to a greater or lesser degree wears a mask to
Yes,
work
yes, of
and,
course.
and to the world.
Yeah.
But at some point, you have to. There has to be an allowance for maybe I don't like to contribute in a certain way. I don't like to, or I can't contribute in a certain way, or I can't do the things that you do. I can't do those social rituals, whether I'm an introvert or whether I'm on a spectrum of sorts, or whether I'm neurodivergent in any way, or whether my religion precludes me. If you can't play those games, how am I going to make sure that you're still part of the bigger game?
Yeah, yeah, it's so important, so important. And what do you think? Was there any experience in your life based off that where you really created or you found awareness that kind of shaped how you lead? Was there any experience that was outside of yourself?
I think, there started coming times, as I sort of moved into my career specifically, where there was always colleagues and friends, and myself, whose ways of working and thinking didn't fit this mold, and they were labelled as difficult or different when people were being polite. Difficult or different were the polite terms. And what I started seeing was, and I felt it for myself, and these so-called misfits, is they actually brought brilliant perspectives to the table. They just needed a different kind of support or space. And seeing how overlooked they could be and what that did to them and to me just made me more aware of how traditional systems, and I think it's still largely the case in many workplaces, they reward sameness, don't they?
Yeah.
And I started realizing that inclusion has to go beyond your surface level differences and really into how people see the world and process the world. And I work in a field which is all about making meaning, and yet we are so oblivious to we're so focused on making meaning for paying audiences that we're not focused on how do the people that make this meaning and that are the creatives and that are our people, how do we focus on them?
Yes, yeah, it's really really important, and I guess just there's some things you touched on there, and I know that you don't have a formal diagnosis, but when you say that you always felt like you didn't fit in, do you feel that perhaps that you may share some of the traits or thinking of the neurodivergent community?
Look, as you say, I don't have a formal diagnosis, and I'm reluctant to go and seek one. My wife, who is an organizational psychologist, firmly believes that I'm an ADHD sufferer, and I see many of the
Or thriver?
I see many of the traits, many of the characteristics that could be. I've also worked with people who have who have a formal diagnosis, and I think those moments where you realize, hold on, I don't have a formal diagnosis, but I I relate to you. I relate. I see where you're coming from. I I feel the same blocks that you are feeling. I see how you are processing information differently and finding focuses and patterns that other people are overlooking, and I think that makes you more humble and more empathetic, and I think it makes you want to be a little more curious and flexible, and stop assuming things and stop assuming that people all operate like me or operate like you.
Do you feel that maybe when you understand how different people process the world and you relate, that you have some level of acceptance of yourself, or you have a level of I fit in here?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think coming to terms with yourself, and that is, for me, it is something that has come with time and experience, and I wish for many people who are struggling to feel included, I wish them a faster path to self acceptance than I had. But once you accept that you're not necessarily going to fit in, and that's not a bad thing, and that you stop beating yourself up for it, I think you immediately start becoming, once you're less angry, because when you're not fitting in and when you're being pushed aside, often that comes across as angry. And then people think, oh, look at that angry young man or that angry person. and you're not angry at all. You're just sad and frustrated and excluded. And once you accept that you don't have to be angry, then suddenly you're less, well, you are less angry. And you're less pushy with people, and you're more accepting and more accepted. And it's a virtuous circle, isn't it?
Really, like, how can you know what you don't know? And that's one thing that I definitely relate to is understanding myself led to acceptance, because for so long I misunderstood myself, so I was frustrated at all them things that I couldn't do, or the social expectations that were anxiety provoking for me. So I had poor coping mechanisms. So yeah, it's really, I think that awareness, that education, it doesn't happen overnight that you start accepting yourself. But once you start understanding little by little, you do make your way back to who you were supposed to be, and that being okay.
Absolutely.
Do
That's,
you what?
that resonates so strongly. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have, or have you seen any environmental or cultural shifts that have made meaningful shifts for inclusivity within the workplace?
I think, look, as I'm going to keep saying over and over again, I'm not big, I'm not an expert on facilitating the workplace for neurodivergent individuals specifically, but I am passionate about creating workspaces that are inclusive for people, full stop,
Yeah,
for different.
all of us.
And and I think for all individuals, clarity and flexibility go a long, long way. And so if you set really, really clear expectations, if you, and I mean, these are common sense things, they're not just for a limited sector of our working population. Like, set clear expectations, have fewer unnecessary meetings, create space for multiple different ways to contribute, whether that's written or visual or verbal. That can all make a big difference.
Yeah.
Inviting feedback in multiple ways helps people who don't feel comfortable speaking up in a traditional format or being the only voice in the room. And just giving people a bit of space physically and psychologically to do their best thinking. I've seen real shifts when that happens. When people understand that, hold on, I don't have to actually, present to a client. I've seen people freeze in front of a client, and and then you realize, well, hold on, they do such brilliant work in other areas. Why do they have to be a client-facing person? They don't. Why do they have to be the person who talks in a boardroom? They prefer one-on-one, or they prefer written, or they prefer a voice note. And why can't we open up? And by making that flexibility really goes a long way to shifting the boundaries of what's possible and to making people feel more comfortable.
Yes, yes, so true, so true. Is there any maybe individual experience that you've seen where this, psychological safety has been put in place, and you could see someone flourish because their different mind, or the way they work was seen and accommodated for?
Yes, absolutely. I've seen this in the last few months where you see brilliant people, really specifically, two people that I can think of in the last year who really are such smart people and have such smart thinking and such smart ideas. But if you put them in both of them in a certain scenario where they were expected to do something that people of their level were supposed to do, that they just didn't do themselves or anyone else around them justice. And by realizing that that's not what they have to do or how they have to contribute, it really fundamentally shifted the way, the one person that I'm thinking of, came to me weeks later and said she was actually thinking of leaving because she felt so awkward and out of place. And now she feels that she can actually, now that she's been given the safety, as it were, the knowledge that you don't have to do those things. You don't have to be the one who presents to a client. You don't have to, because we tend to, in the consulting field, you have to, everyone's a salesperson. You have to get up and sell your ideas to the client. And some people don't do that. And I've actually seen that by saying, okay, I'm taking that away from you, you give me your thinking in a different way. It, it means, do you retain a brilliant mind or do you lose them? And and it's not just losing a brilliant mind, it's a brilliant mind that thinks differently to you. It's a younger mind, it's a mind from a different background. And all of those things are so important to breaking this echo chamber that we often find ourselves in.
As a leader, holding that space for your team, it, I, I guess it must be quite a lonely place to be in. Is there a lot of weight that you have to carry on a daily basis?
I I don't think it's it's not particularly lonely in that I I'm surrounded by people. And for a start, let me be very clear, I'm an introvert, so I'm perfectly okay being alone.
Yes,
I,
I hear
I don't
you.
I, I don't like to be lonely. um, but being a leader of a diverse team is actually, it's exhausting. It's not lonely. I don't experience it as lonely. I experience it as exhausting because you have to constant being empathetic and giving of yourself is, it can be exhausting. But by the same token, when you find yourself in a relationship with a young person, a working relationship where you are mentoring or something, the beauty of engaging with diverse people is that you learn as much from them as they do from you. And that's an incredibly enriching process. So, you know, is it exhausting? Yes. Is it lonely? Not particularly. Does it take a lot of time? Absolutely. I mean, I never realized before I led teams how much time just listening to people and dealing with people issues takes, because we're all human. And this goes way beyond, people think that in a business, people issues are managing your leave or your salary. That's all stuff that can be automated and dealt with. It's really dealing with the human beings who sometimes they're up, sometimes they're not up for work, and recognizing when they're feeling it or when they're not, recognizing when they've got a sick mother or a sick sister or a sick baby and they need a little bit of space. Those dynamics with a person is with people. That's what makes it difficult, and really trying to be attuned to that, because you're not always 100% open yourself. So it's really trying to stay as open and receptive and empathetic as you can, being human yourself.
Vulnerability, I do agree, I think is so important. Just as I'm listening, it just sounds like leaders really would benefit them going through mental health first aid training, mental health support, because the load you carry, of the different people at the end of the day, that you're responsible. It's like a troop. You're responsible for getting through the day. It's a lot to carry.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, in the PR industry, and especially in the UAE, there's quite a strong grouping emerging of people, of like minded people who are focusing and talking more, and they're making more of a conversation around mental health in the PR industry. And I think, what we're really finding is that there's a greater awareness, but it now needs to transfer into a situation where people are actually getting tools and support. So we're talking about mental health, but what are we doing for leaders and people below them? What are we doing for them? So we have a conversation and we're all aware, but how is that going to help me not burn out?
Yeah, of course we can educate people, but actually training them is very important. Like a psychotherapist, you have to go through your clinical supervision. You're trained how to detach, how to prepare before you go into sessions so that you're not burnt out. I often say people who are face on daily, it must be a huge weight to carry when you don't have that training of how to detach, and an incredible load to carry. Do you have any tools that you use right now that help you navigate? Or
I I am
Are they not
blessed.
healthy ones?
I am blessed to well, I'm blessed to firstly live in a country where I can't get too unhealthy with my coping mechanisms, and and I'm also blessed to have an astonishing relationship with a partner, with a wife who listens and who you're able to unpack with and really almost debriefs you. And I don't think everyone has
No.
that privilege, and I think it's really really important. And this is where I think in my not my frustration, but my wish for corporate HR functions is to stop talking about mental health and start delivering, bringing in experts who can really debrief people. Because leadership in today's world, I mean, if you look at the UAE and KSA, it's a constant hustle. There's pressure. And for leaders, I look at my own boss and his boss, there's constant financial pressure. It's relentless. There's constant pressure from clients and deadlines. There's constant pressure about people. What do you do? If you don't ride a bicycle or go running, what do you, how do you stop yourself burning? And I've seen people close to me, very, very close to me, burn. And once you've burned, it takes a long, long time to heal. But so how do we catch that? And how do we as leaders, what mechanisms do we have around us to
Yeah.
stop that? Because the danger is real and we see it. We see it. I think we all know people who are down that path or who have burned already.
Yeah, and what you want is, your employees to be self-aware. When they start becoming self-aware and responsible for themselves, then it's less on a manager or a leader to have to guide and identify that. And although you might have top performers who will get the job done, it will lead to burnout. And realistically, you're probably going to lose that staff member down to a severe illness. And getting back from that burnout is a very, very difficult place to be. Um, so it's really, really important. Thank you. I really do appreciate you sharing that. I was going to ask is what barriers do you see in place for inclusivity within the workplace?
I think the biggest barrier that I'm seeing is this default assumption that there is one right way to work or to behave. And, in the communications and creative industries, we tend to celebrate things like extroversion and speed and consensus and groupthink and being on the same page. And that often leaves a lot of people out. And as leaders, we can start by asking why are things being done a certain way and creating more space and more choice in how people can contribute and collaborate and succeed. And I think so for me, that biggest barrier is really just these unquestioned default assumptions. And we've got to question why. Because for me, the whole starting point of creativity is asking, is there a different way to do this? And we do that for our clients and for their campaigns and for their work, but we don't do it about the way we work. Is there a different way to do this? Oh, we're losing a lot of people right now. Or all of the people that sit in front of me in my office, they all think the same, or they have a similar background, and how can I do it differently? So the biggest barrier is just this assumption. We've got to challenge it. We've got to actively challenge it and change it.
And that's in any relationship, that's in a personal relationship. That's something, myself and my husband, we talk about all the time is are we assuming something or are we actually having that conversation? Like for me, I need very clear communication. I can't always read signals that other people might see. There's even things like humor. I take things quite literally. So if I see someone smiling or laughing, I know that it's a sarcastic joke. But if I don't, I do take it quite literal. So avoiding assumptions that is just asking, as for anyone, it's how are you feeling or what's going on in this situation for you, without just assuming that, as you said earlier, they think the same as you. Um, it's so important. What would you say to other leaders who are looking to be inclusive? And where would you advise them to start? Because it's a long, it's a long place. You're not going to get there overnight. It's little by little, and getting it right little by little instead of trying to do it all at once.
Well, I don't know how qualified I am to give advice myself, but what I can say to other leaders is, in my own experience, start by being curious and ask people how they like to work. We have these big onboarding processes for people, and then we have these big team building exercises that are often painful especially for people who are a little different or a little differently minded. I mean, I hate team building exercises. I hate the forced spontaneity of it. Forced and spontaneity shouldn't even be.
Organized fun.
But start by asking people how they like to work, and offer honest and genuine flexibility, and welcome feedback, and really welcome feedback. Because if you ask for feedback, you're not always going to get feedback that you like, but you've got to be open to taking it. You've got to get comfortable being a little bit uncomfortable, don't you? And you don't need to have all the answers. That's my advice, is just be open and adaptable, and learn from those who have lived experience in certain things, whether that is a neurodivergence or whether it's a different cultural background. Be open to learning from them about their lived experiences. I mean, you touched on the sense of humor thing. I've found, since working in the Middle East and working with these diverse people that I am surrounded with every day, is that, you know, growing up as an English speaking South African, a lot of our humor was quite British in that there's some sarcasm and it's quite dry humor, and and my wife, who's an Afrikaans speaking South African, she doesn't get this, that British humor. And I see many Arabic speaking people, they don't get that humor. So you have to be very careful about how you make jokes and when you make jokes. And if you're throwing out an Arabic phrase that you learned, be very clear on what it means before you use it, and so on. But so learn from the people who have lived experience. Ask the question and let their insights guide your practices.
And on that, is there anything that someone has said to you as one of your staff members and you as a leader that has influenced how you've led, like maybe changed direction?
Yes, absolutely. So there've been, especially if I go back 8, 10 years ago to when I was, fairly new into the Middle East, was that you think that things that you can say in a boardroom in South Africa or in London or possibly New York, you can't say those things. You can't say things about people. You can't make jokes about religion or sensitive topics that, in a Western society where everybody is largely the same, we all know what you mean. Here, people don't know what you mean. And that's why you've got to be very clear on understanding what is their reality and what is their perception and what is their expectation. And if you don't ask them, you're not going to know that. And I was fortunate to have colleagues then, wise Arabic speaking colleagues who would, draw me aside and say, here's the sensitivity that I'd like to explain to you. And I think we shouldn't always wait for a wise colleague, especially it's not just in the Middle East. I think anywhere in the world now where we are working with a diverse workforce, and where we should be encouraging a diverse workforce, let's be frank, but we should be asking questions. For me, I still see in many cases in Western boardrooms where women are, on the face of it, women are equal partners at the table, but the dialogue and the approach suggests otherwise. So why are we not fitting our narratives to what we really mean? We say people are equal, or we say we value all voices, but we're not living it. And the only way you're going to do that is by constantly questioning your old assumptions.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful you said that, because as I said earlier, I take things literal. And if someone says something to me and their actions don't match find it confusing.
Okay.
So yeah, that's really, really helpful. So obviously, I appreciate you bringing up women and our gender balance, but just that topic of how people really find that confusing, where someone's actually, even in personal relationships or business relationships, you make promises and then don't follow through. That may have an impact, a big impact on another person, and it can lead to mistrust. So you can learn to mistrust a leader, learn to mistrust a partner, a friend. So then small things that seem small actually have a huge impact on your team or your relationships.
Completely.
Yeah, really, really valid point. Thank you. If you could redesign the workplace, is there any way you would redesign it?
I would I would really prioritize psychological safety. And and the thing is that this starts, I think, in every relationship, in every meaningful relationship in your life. We talk so much, and it's quite a popular modern phrase, is this idea of psychological safety. And
Yeah,
understand, what does it really mean? It means that you can be vulnerable with me. It means that you can talk about anything, like in an intimate partner relationship, for instance. It means that we can talk about anything. You can talk about money, you can talk about sex, you can talk about worries, you can talk about, and you are safe. You
yeah,
are safe. So how do we take that psychological safety into a workplace? So for me, redesigning workplace culture would start with that psychological safety, where you are safe to come to work and ask any question and wear anything that is important to you from a religious or a cultural point of view, to live in a certain way, to be in a certain way. The other thing, flexible working styles. There's such a huge debate at the moment about working from home or working remotely. And I don't think that's, for me, that's not the issue. The issue is more around flexibility. And
yes,
flexibility goes to what works better for other people. I happen to be a morning person. I would love to work from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. Other people, and especially I see this in the Middle East, they only get into the office at 12 o'clock, but they leave at 8. I don't mind how many hours you spend in the office. I don't mind whether you work from home or not. But I think the bigger discussion that we should be having is, how do I allow you to be flexible in when you are at the office, in what channels you use to deliver work and to provide feedback and to provide inputs. And then the third thing is a deep culture of feedback. It's so important that we really embed feedback into a workplace at every level. And I think people don't do it because they don't always feel, which goes back to the first part, is they don't feel safe to do so. If they point something out, they feel they might be victimized or picked upon. And I would build in these different modes of contribution, not just the one who speaks loudest in the room. And I would make reflection and rest as valuable as action and delivery and output. And I'm building different ways for people to show up and to contribute. And so it's if I have to use PR speak to sum up my answer, three things I would build my workplace culture around: psychological safety, flexibility, feedback.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's incredible, really incredible. And I think that goes both ways. I think leaders, obviously they have to lead and they're carrying a weight, but I think employees have to remember that too. That there is a big weight going on there, and it should be safe both directions, not just one. That you're a team. Thank you. Is there any hope you have for the future in diversity or neurodiversity specifically?
Yes, I think there is. I think we're really talking about moving towards leadership that is truly human centered. And I think I think there's a greater awareness, which is the starting point. And the starting point is that we stop trying to fix people to fit systems and start fixing systems to fit people.
Yeah,
And my hope and my belief is that leadership is becoming more about creating the conditions for brilliance to emerge in all of its diverse forms. And I mean, there's a popular phrase that is often used in many different contexts, and that's allyship. And And I think it's really important to understand that I'm seeing more allyship coming through in the workplace. And for me, work, allyship takes many forms. And this is particularly sensitive to me because I come from South Africa, where I am white in a largely black country, and that comes with a certain set of privilege. And I cannot presume to speak for anyone else. I cannot presume to speak for a woman. I cannot presume to speak for a menopausal woman. I cannot presume to speak for a neurodivergent person. So it's all about trying to listen first and learn. And when you do speak up and show allyship, it is so important. And I think I'm seeing this more in the workplace, which what gives me hope is that make it clear that you're showing allyship to support and not to speak for or to assume any insights. My role is to make space and not to fill it. And I think I'm seeing more of that, which is what makes me optimistic.
Listening to understand, not respond.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, so true. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. What leadership. In, I guess, regards to all this, how are you today? Is there anything now, knowing what you know about life, that you would say to your younger self? Is there anything you'd like to say to them?
I would say to my younger self, be gentler with yourself and accept yourself first and stop taking life so personally, because what what you realize at a certain point in your life, and some realize it sooner than others, is what other people do around you. It's often, in fact, mostly, it's not aimed at you at all. It's about them. They're just
Yeah.
trying. They're just trying to survive, aren't they? And and it's not about you. So if you can learn to accept yourself and accept your differences, and accept that you're not going to be in that particular clique or that particular group, but you can still love yourself first, it will make you more accessible to other people, because prickly, grumpy, angry, defensive people aren't easy to get close to. And
No.
once you're more accepting of yourself, it's easier for people to get closer to you, and then they are more open to actually listening to you and understanding you. And it's such a difficult one. There's no easy way around it. But I would say to my younger self, learn to love yourself and stop taking other people personally. They have struggles that you cannot dream about. You don't know them. You don't know their struggles. The people who are loudmouths and bullies at work, they are fighting. Every home has its own cross to bear, and you don't know theirs. So live with yours.
You don't know what's going on behind anyone's door. They can present in the world like a lot of us do, with the masking of making everything look right. We, especially the neurodivergent community, we've almost perfected the art. But when I work with people, it's interesting you said that. When I work with people, I would say to them is, you're the star in your own movie. You can even have your own theme tune, but everybody else around you is the star in theirs. They're not looking at what you're doing. They're hyper analyzing how others perceive them. So yeah, very, very true. Yeah, it's a shame we didn't have a life where we could have experienced that much younger. Thankfully, we've got there in the end.
I think we're far closer to it. I think where when I grew up when I was growing up as a child, there were very clear labels for things. Like if you were autistic, you were non-verbal and non-functional and put away somewhere. If there were very cruel terms, and very ADHD kids were naughty kids, and they were beaten and treated as naughty kids. And I mean, right now, what irritates me in modern discourse is when people say, "Oh, autism is it's one of these new made up things." It's not new or made up at all. And ADHD isn't new or made up. It was just never diagnosed. It was never thought of. And I cannot imagine how many people of my age
Yeah,
suffered immensely as a result of being overseen or misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. And
still do.
and that's heartbreaking. And so it's if we can just make it a little gentler for people who possibly don't have a formal diagnosis, but they're battling. Why can't we? It doesn't stop us from being human. I don't have to know exactly what's going on in your world to be human to you and to allow you space to be yourself.
Accepting people for who they are, not needing a label or a diagnosis. That's what's most important. And I think that judgment, of that, oh, aren't we all a little bit? Aren't we? Like, when you don't know someone's path, when you don't know someone's journey, you have no right to make a comment like that. So yeah, thank you. I really, honestly, really, really appreciate that. Your voice is just amazing today. It's been so valuable. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would feel would benefit the audience, either personally or professionally?
I think we've covered off on most of the points that I would have wanted to touch on in a conversation with like this. I think it's just, if I have to touch on one thing, it's just stay open and curious and accepting, and understand that diversity is not fitting people to fit your world. It's opening your world to include them. And once you do that, the enrichment is immense. Your life is immensely enriched by just opening up. And so it's not a tick box exercise. It's not something that I've been mandated to do or that you should feel mandated to do. It's just, if you truly want to open your world to the magic of other opinions and other ways of being, you will discover magic and brilliance and joy in places that you didn't think were possible.
Thank you. Thank you. And can I ask you that I know you have a wonderful wife who supports you, but please do take care of yourself and while you're leading. It's so valuable to have someone like you in leadership. So we don't want you burning out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.